This is the Aptitude Outdoors podcast, where we interview travelers, explorers, and outdoorsmen and women to bring you the best tips and stories from around the world. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Aptitude Outdoors podcast. Today we have David Ruck, filmmaker and, advocate for the Great Lakes, which is awesome. So, David, you say you just got done running. How are you doing this wonderful day?
Pretty good. Half marathon coming up in just over a week, and so it's pretty brutal the last, I'm in the taper phase now, but I feel like I don't sleep anymore. My body's just always in go mode.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm training for an adventure race up in Michigan. It's total between bike, kayak, and run. It's a little close to 30 miles, and my body is not happy with me right now. So I'm right there with you, man.
All right, solidarity.
Yeah. So, I was really struck with your film, The Erie Situation, that just came out not that long ago. And I would assume you've been working on that for a while.
Yeah.
And it really hit home to me because, even sitting in the theater watching the film itself, I know the places that you're filming. I've been to a lot of the places that were on the film, and I'm just like, it really hits home. So, a lot of people, even in this region, rely on the Great Lakes, but they also pretend that they don't exist, especially where I'm at, like in the Toledo area, Lake Erie. It's just kind of there, and it's not something that, unless you're a fisherman or have a boat, you just kind of ignore Lake Erie. So what drew you to telling this story? Because for me, it's one of the most important stories that you can tell at this point in the game for Lake Erie.
It's interesting, the observation that people, they don't exist to some people. I thought immediately you were referring to the Farm Bureau. At least as a lake, it doesn't exist as a lake to them. It's more of a toilet. But I grew up on the Great Lakes. I grew up on Lake Michigan, and I spent every day that was reasonable during the summer months, in the water growing up, and you take it for granted in that sense, being near it, and it just is a part of your life from the very beginning. And, when I was a kid, I'd be out there swimming for hours, and you'd gulp water every now and then. I never worried about that. I never got sick. After working on projects like this and kind of being more aware of the issues that are out there and the issues that are either, getting worse or not getting any better. You always have to kind of look twice now, even at the bigger lakes, the deeper ones, it's sort of like, man, what's in there today? Folks are doing a lot of work to kind of understand that in real time, especially in Lake Erie, because it's kind of its own science experiment, unfortunately. But that's just kind of that's the world we've created with our impacts on land and land use. Has a direct impact on water and water quality. Mm-hmm. And as far as the Great Lakes are concerned, that's no more apparent than in Lake Erie. And anyone that's listening to your podcast probably knows that Lake Erie's the shallowest of the lakes, and it makes it more susceptible to changes. It also, flushes water out more quickly than the other lakes. But because of its depth and because of the fact that it can change temperature more rapidly, warms up quicker in the summer, and the fact that all this agricultural runoff is just being, dumped into it essentially on an annual basis, it has the problems that we see in the film.
The thing that I really enjoyed about the film is there were jabs where they needed to be taken against, big industry, big farming industry. And, you're not targeting the small farmer because, they're, a lot of those guys are just struggling to make it day to day. I live in a highly agricultural area outside of Toledo. surrounded on all sides by farm. Like that's where I live. And, you know, I think you really did a awesome job of not like making just the word farming into a bad word, because that's, even just saying this now, people will get upset. But I mean, go ahead.
That's the culture that the Farm Bureau has created. You know, it's sort of like our politics. It's like you're either going to put a Trump flag in your yard or not, or you know, going to be pro farming of all kinds, or you're anti farm. You know, there's no like, we're not allowed to kind of have any nuance to those viewpoints anymore, right? And the film takes a very nuanced approach, I think. Yeah. To as you just pointed out, you know, it's actually a very pro farming film.
I would agree.
But you know, and the thing is that the talking points out there, the flags that you're told to hang in your yard if you're involved in agriculture in any way, shape, or form, is anytime anyone brings up the word farming and points to an environmental issue, well, you're all supposed to get defensive and threaten not to grow food anymore. You know, because that's our way of responding to the lefty environmentalist tree hugger people. And a good farmer is an environmentalist. A good farmer is aware of what's happening in their soils. A good farmer is growing food with high nutritional value. They have crop diversity. They're not doing these things on a industrial or near industrial scale, like the farms that are causing the problems. And so certainly when you have a geographical region that small, large farms all mixed together, just, you know, where the vast majority of land use is agriculture, I think any way you sort that out, like you're probably going to have impacts to water quality. But we're not doing ourselves any favors by increasing the number of animals in the watershed at rates that are really hard to measure, because unless you're above a certain amount, there's really no record of your existence in the state of Ohio.
That's the one thing that I really kind of changed my perspective with the film specifically, is you brought up the map and it showed all the registered CAFOs within our watershed, the Lake Erie watershed, which is, if people don't know, is massive, by the way. Like the Maumee River runs into, there's tons of stuff going in there. But the map you brought up showed the ones that were registered, the ones that are actively considered, you know, CAFOs, and then there's a map of the ones that are just under the threshold to be CAFOs, and that really blew me away, because that's like basically getting away with murder as far as I'm concerned on like a huge scale, and it's kind of like eye-opening. I hope more people see that, and you know, I hope people listening to this will go watch the film, or at least take a look at the map or something, because that really blew me away. How did you find that information? I mean, that's just insane to me.
Well, that's research that was done by the Environmental Working Group, and a few weeks ago they expanded it to the entire basin. So all the way from like Indiana, I can't remember without having it in front of me. Like basically they've expanded the map to include areas beyond that, and it's like, oh God, don't quote me on this, but it's something like 90% of the farms are falling below that threshold. 90% of the animal feeding operations are falling below that threshold. It's something like 2,500 or something. And in the film, the map that we rely on was their earlier map for a smaller area that showed 700 and some odd CAFOs, and then 70 of them are above the amount that triggers the permitting process, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, the environmental working group has been doing that kind of investigation through, around the country for years now, where they're analyzing using satellite data the types of farming operations, industrial farming operations that are impacting a watershed. And of course, the Farm Bureau's response to that is, oh, well, you're just throwing darts at the dartboard by guessing that these are animal feeding operations or whatever. I mean, okay, so why isn't Ohio State doing that research? Why aren't the other land grant universities doing that? I guess I just answered my own question. It's because the funding is coming, from agriculture to do the research about agriculture. Mm-hmm. And it's as basic and simple as that. That's the point I'm trying to make, is that, folks like this, again, the lobbyists are just paid extremely high amounts of money to control the conversation and create talking points, little sound bites that are easily shareable, that someone who's not inclined to critical thought, can just sort of regurgitate and say, like, well, that's not real research, or that's not scientific, or whatever. And then that kind of, gets that makes its way to the legislature, and the status quo remains. So, I'm hoping that with the work that folks like that are doing, and the film that we've made, more people can understand the reality. That, is that map 100% accurate? It's probably 95% accurate. Does that change the calculus? Not really. We know, I mean, even the department, the Ohio EPA is saying 85-90% of the phosphorus going into Lake Erie is from farm runoff. So, I mean, we know that this is happening. The map just shows us how. I would encourage people to check out Environmental Working Group.
Yeah, and I'll put a link up on either on YouTube or on the show notes of the podcast where people can check out that map, because I have it saved to my phone still from going and checking out the film. And I think one of the things that's really been on my mind lately is, in the end, people don't give a shit about facts as far as I'm concerned. I care about facts because I try to stay informed on these issues, but the average person I've found could care less about facts. And that's why I think the filmmaking side of what you're doing is very important, because you can pull facts in an emotional way and not just spout facts. And I think we need more of that, because the emotional attachment to it is what gets people to care. I would, in my opinion, I don't know how accurate that is, but I mean, from what I've found, you can tell people that there's 90% of this and that going to Lake Wave from this and that, and they just don't care because it's just a number and it doesn't mean anything to them. So, I think your film has done a really good job with that. And one of the things that I've always had a high respect for filmmakers is they're always able to find the most interesting people. How'd you go about finding the people you interviewed for the film? Because they were just they were almost like paid actors. They were so good, but they were just regular old Toledoans, essentially.
Yeah, well, they're not paid actors.
No.
We were out in the Defiance, Ohio area, gathering footage of a giant chicken CAFO. Mm-hmm. And when we were done with that, we just were sort of driving around and just started surveying some of these smaller farms of hey, what do you, we're doing a film about Lake Erie. We want to know if farmers are aware of the issues with Lake Erie. We want to know if they are aware that they get blamed for it. And I stopped in this one guy's yard, his kid was playing with a pig just in the yard. And it just looked very quaint and, what idyllic, well, this is a farm. Yeah. This is the family farm. And I talked to this guy, and this guy's like, what you need to do is go up this street, take the first left, and then take the first right, and you're going to see a red barn, and that's going to be Joe. And you need to talk to Joe because Joe knows more about this stuff. And sure enough, Joe was everything that I was looking for in terms of trying to tell the story of the small farmer who's trying to do the next right thing. Mm-hmm. And, Joe took some time. I think he may have even taken like a month and a half to decide with his family if he wanted to be involved with the project and share his viewpoints. Mm-hmm. But I mean, we need more people like Joe. Joe's an organic dairy farmer. He's very interested in soil health. To be clear, not all organic farms are run in an environmentally sustainable way.
Yeah.
But the soil health people, they have an extra focus on, is the soil chemistry organic, and is it healthy? Is it sustainable? And what are my impacts to the watershed? And those are the kind of folks that really struggle to get any benefit from something like the Farm Bill, which is, I think, like second to the operating budget of the Department of Defense on an annual basis. It's like we spend so much money on the Farm Bill, and yet all of the farmers who are doing the next right thing, sure, there's some things in there so that they can have a talking point that says, look at all we're doing to make farms greener and more sustainable and environmentally friendly. But like that is like a drop in the bucket compared to the subsidies to grow corn for fuel and animal feed, which is a whole other topic. And really, the people that access and leverage that funding are people that have already accessed and leveraged that funding. They're multi-million-dollar operations typically. And, what's left in there for the small farmer who wants to grow a nutritious crop, a diverse crop, and really have a mind towards the consumer rather. Yes, everybody needs to make a living, but I don't know that the Farm Bill should be a jobs program, which is essentially what growing corn for fuel and animal feed is. So it's, how do we support more farmers like Joe? And they don't all have to be organic farmers. They don't all have to be, organic dairy farmers. What we need to see more of is more farmers, younger farmers who are just getting started out, have a government program, if that's the way we want to go, that supports them. And right now, that huge bunch of money, thanks again because of the fine work of the farm lobby, most of those resources go towards well-established, white-owned farmers. So if we call them farmers, industrialists, and so that's really that. I think someone like Joe exists outside the system. Because the system doesn't really have anything to offer a farmer trying to do what he's doing. There's, like I said, there's little things in there, but they're certainly not going to support a national system with a mind towards sustainability and nutrition, and with a consequence of a clean environment at the end of the line there. So if we, that's kind of, you kind of talked at the beginning, maybe it was before you hit record, about, next projects and things like that. I really want to dig into, follow the money with this Farm Bill stuff, and just dig a little deeper into that, not just in Ohio, but nationwide. Because there's just a lot of really dumb things that we're doing, like growing almonds in the desert of California. I mean, it takes a gallon of water to grow a freaking almond, and everybody over there is like, oh, don't take more than a 5-minute shower.
Yeah.
But it's fine to run the wells dry to grow almonds. I mean, why?
Yeah.
Well, so it's a systemic problem, and what we see in Lake Erie is just symptomatic of the system that we've set up, and it's not good for the environment. It's not good for nutrition. It's not good for farmers. It's good for industrialists, and that's. I mean, and I'm not saying that as an activist. I'm not saying that as anything other than like, let's just step back and look at this for what it is. But what you just said was that people aren't interested in facts, right? People aren't interested in the details of something. And I think that if more people really understood what's going on and how it functions, most people don't think about this beyond going to Walmart and buying what they need at a price they can afford and doing the same thing the next week.
Correct.
If they're thinking about this in terms of, if I buy that, are my grandkids going to have clean water to drink? Or if I buy that, like, what's the real nutritional value in that kale versus that kale? Like, these are the kinds of things that people really can have an impact on if they knew something more about the system and how it's working against their health, and it's working against the future of environmental quality. Yeah. So anyway, and then layer on top of that the fact that this jurisdictional Venn diagram of who's responsible for taking care of what. Again, the ag lobby has done a real good job of sort of pushing folks like the EPA out of their business. Look no further than in the state of Ohio, where the governor just signed a law that deregulates these ephemeral streams, which, they're basically the headwaters of the watershed that runs into Lake Erie. They've said, oh, those aren't U.S. waters. That's an agricultural ditch. And because that's an agricultural ditch, we can't regulate it under the Clean Water Act. So then, EPA, go mind your own business. And somebody could tell the EPA, no, that's incorrect. The state of Ohio is not with this law, the state of Ohio is not operating within the spirit of the Clean Water Act. You need to tell them to change their business. But that's a huge process, and that takes years. And, you may or may not see any progress on something like that. That's not to say that those battles shouldn't still be considered or fought. But just to illustrate the point that how are we supposed to protect and keep clean water when a critical part of what drives algae blooms every year in Lake Erie, these ephemeral streams or agricultural ditches, which are filled with crap every year, and then in the spring it's just flushed out into the lake.
Yep.
I mean, if we're not gonna treat that under the Clean Water Act, what are we doing? And it's just sort of like turning a blind eye to the reality on the ground. Anyway.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you feel like you're getting something out of it, go down in the link below and buy me a coffee. The Aptitude Outdoors podcast is fully self-funded by me. So if you're digging it, I'm just throwing out a tip jar, and I appreciate you listening. Let's dive right back into this episode. Yeah, well, no, you touched on a ton of great points in that. And, there's a lot to pick apart there, but I think in the end is what's in my thought process is you cannot be a quote unquote environmentalist, activist, conservationist, preservationist, whatever term you want to fall under. You can't, everything's so intertwined now that you can't not learn about farming. You cannot learn about water right issues. You cannot not learn about, industry if you're going to care about this stuff, because like I've learned more about farming in the last half a decade than I ever thought or cared to know, because it's so just woven together with the issues that are going on. Water is, arguably it's the most important element on earth, and we're just kind of like trashing it, So it's like, where do we as a society start to give a shit? Because like, what I've see is nobody cares until it's almost too late, or it's like beyond the point where they can care. Like even with the algal bloom, it shut down all of our water supply here in Toledo. And I mean, people were scrambling. I remember like people getting in trouble for tripling the price of water bottles, and like gas stations getting plastered all over Facebook because they're like price gouging people. And it's like, if that's not an eye opener, I don't know what is going to be, because it's like things like this aren't just going to get better over time unless people start paying attention. They're going to get worse and happen more often. And we have one of the most insane water resources on the planet right here in the Great Lakes region. Like if California had this water, it'd be game over. They'd suck the lakes dry and grow more almonds. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I struggle with, I don't know what to do at this point. I mean, I'm out here with a microphone and yelling as loud as I can. You're out there with a camera telling stories, and there's tons of other people doing similar things. It's like, how do we get people to listen? That's the hard part, because they want to tune out and keep it easy and not have to think about it.
Yeah. Well, you kind of remind me of that Keanu Reeves film, The Man Who Fell to Earth, I think is what it's called.
I don't think I've seen it.
Where he's this super alien force that's basically there to destroy the planet and hit the reset button, because human beings have essentially destroyed it. And, John Cleese is this professor who there's a scene where they interact, and Keanu Reeves' character is just like, you guys have had your chance. You're not taking care of this planet, and we're gonna vaporize you. and the professor's like, we don't change until we absolutely have to.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's kind of the point of that film, is that things are being destroyed. The planet's this is put into motion where human beings are being eradicated from the planet, but then while that's happening, people start to change.
Mm-hmm.
And Keanu Reeves' character, I can't remember his name, but like, observes this, and he's like, oh, okay, you guys do really change. You guys do really change, but yeah, death has to be knocking on your door before you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And, so how do we change that? I mean, you're asking, how do we change human behavior? And I don't know the answer to that. I guess fund education. Get more people outside, get more people to the lake. There's when I was a kid, everything we learned was in a textbook. And now they're making, schools that have at least some resources or get a grant or are doing more with outdoor education, place-based education. You hear a lot more about these citizen science efforts. Those are like, well-intentioned and good. And, not every one of those kids grows up and becomes a biologist or something. Maybe they go into law, or they become a tradesperson or whatever. But at least they've had exposure to, this sort of how the system works, meaning the environment, how what's happening on the land impacts what's in the water, and how to determine what a healthy ecosystem is. At least they've seen, so it's not just this, so it's not just this concept in outer space of like you know, can human beings alter the planet? You know, it's like, no, this is how that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And they go on and they can have a career and whatever, but like, you know, be an informed and engaged adult that, you know, maybe incorporates this sort of thinking into what they do when they go to the polls. At least that's the hope. So, I mean, to me, it's making facts approachable. It's making the information engaging. I think that's where filmmaking comes in, and storytelling. You know, it's not really about. I mean, there's different ways of looking at what I do, right? I mean, you pointed out and called it like, you know, using emotion or something like that. Yes and no. I mean, that you know, somebody could suggest that I'm using emotion to manipulate or something like that. Like, no, I'm just finding real average folks. You know, like the guy in the film who builds boats and he's a sailor. Like, he has no concept of when I meet him of why his lake is turning green. You know, he doesn't know what that stuff is. He just knows he feels like shit when he gets off of being on the water for hours on end. Yeah. He's not a scientist. This is just an average person who really, from being involved in this film, has gotten, you know, at least a bachelor's degree, as I feel like I have. Maybe I've gotten a master's degree in how this system works, meaning drivers that are causing these algae blooms in Lake Erie. But, you know, it's really, to me, I just call it contextualizing. You know, the movie is full of facts and it's full of information, and it's just using or showing the stories of everyday people who are interacting with a system like most people do, whether they're aware of it or not, so that the other average people can see themselves and relate to that person. So somebody's gonna relate to Joe because, like, yeah, well, I want to do the next right thing too. Or somebody can relate to Ken because, like, yeah, I was on that lake and I felt like shit after I got off too, and I don't know why. Well, now we can maybe start to understand why, and if people can start to understand the why, then they can start to, you know, decide, you know, is that important enough that I should learn more? I should be engaged. I should be concerned about this the next time somebody asks me for an opinion on it, you know? So, there's a lot of money being spent to call people who illustrate facts, activists, or, you know, like there was an article written about my film 2 days after it premiered at the Cleveland International Film Festival that called it unconscionable and without merit. I mean, paid for by the farm lobby. So, I mean, there's always going to be money being spent to get people riled up and angry using very simple, ill-informed talking points to push back against this stuff. And it's been extremely successful in a place like Ohio, where, like the mayor points out, agree or disagree. I mean, he says the Farm Bureau has been very successful. In fact, the Ohio legislature is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Farm Bureau. I mean, wow. I mean, maybe them are fighting words, but look at the laws that are passed, and how can you, from a practical standpoint, argue any different? I mean, your state's just gerrymandered to all hell. So
yeah,
it's I think I've heard somebody call it like rule by fiat or something, you know, where you know, these little rural fiefdoms are making all the decisions for the majority of the population, which lives in cities and things. So it's really hard to get anything done in your state that's meaningful. But I mean, to be fair, these aren't state of Ohio issues. These are national and global issues. And, if we do pass laws in the state of Ohio to make it more difficult to pollute the water, that's probably going to have an impact on the competitiveness of farms in Ohio versus farms in Indiana or farms in Michigan. And no one who wants to get reelected is going to do something like that. So, you're really looking at establishing national standards for these kinds of things. And to me, that really means reevaluating the Farm Bill and what we mean by it and what we intend with it and who and what we're supporting.
Yeah. Whew, there's a lot. That is it. The rabbit hole just keeps getting deeper and deeper the more I talk about this stuff, which is good for me to know more and learn more. But it's so like people are terrified to go up against the government because it rules our day-to-day lives essentially and everything we do, it feels like. But do you have any advice for people? I mean, I don't know if you consider yourself an activist or whatever. It doesn't matter to me at all. I mean, people that are doing this stuff, I don't care what it's called. Just do it. Like, if you care about the Great Lakes, do it. But do you have any advice for people how to get involved?
I'm not an activist. The problem is that people who are armed with facts, and facts can be big and scary and complicated, and science is messy, they get labeled as activists. And going back to what I just said, it's like, it's much easier to be told something simple about what's happening than it is to understand the complexities of a dynamic system. It's like, take gas prices, for instance. Like, everybody's like, oh, look at the president's raised the gas prices. It's like, they're fucking high in India and the UK, everywhere else globally. This is, but you give this guy a lot of credit for being able to just, pull a lever and change gas prices. So I'm armed with, I try to understand the facts. It took me a year, gathering the content for this film, where, like you said, the rabbit hole. It's like you learn this one thing, and then in the process of learning that one thing, you meet somebody else that says, well, you really ought to look into this. And so then you do the due diligence and you go down that path. Initially this was just going to be a film about algae blooms in Lake Erie. But then it was like, well, now you got to learn about the Farm Bill. Well, now you got to learn about the Maumee River and the watershed. And now you got to learn about the Clean Water Act. And now you got to learn about toxicity and health impacts. And it's just like peeling off the layers of the onion. So, I mean, does that make someone an activist? No, they want to label people like that activists. But I think that people that get acquainted with the facts, there's a U2 lyric, like the older you get, the more you know, like the less you feel. I'm paraphrasing, but it's just like the more you know, the harder things are.
Yes.
And the more facts you get, like the more disturbing reality is in some ways. And we could all go about our day and treat our interaction with each other and the planet with benign neglect, which is sort of what we do as like a species, or as individuals. I think we can just, this isn't about like the difference you're going to make by, recycling or not recycling or something like that. But, but just the mentality of your understanding of who you are, and a realization that you're not observing the system, you're part of the system.
Yes, correct.
It's not that you should or shouldn't be afraid of the government. The government should be afraid of you. you control the government.
Yes.
And you do that by voting. You do that by making your voice heard. You do that by engaging meaningful conversations with your neighbors about issues that are important to you. And be skeptical and doubt things, and don't just accept that the head of the group that you've been paying attention to says this is how you need to think, and you start thinking that's a cult.
Yes.
I'm the kind of person that when everybody starts going left, I tend to lean a little to the right. And when everybody starts going to the right, I tend to lean a little to the left, because I really doubt that whole herd mentality. That, like, what is the sense in that?
Yeah.
And that's an uncomfortable place to be from a social standpoint, because it's like everybody's going one way and you're kind of like either staying put or going the other way. But that's just in my nature, is to be hesitant and skeptical, and want to know a little bit more before I go leaping into doing what I'm told.
Life is hard, and we're out here doing larger-than-life things, whether it's pushing ourselves physically in the outdoors or mentally at work or in the podcast studio. Absolute Aid is here to help you focus, recover, and stay calm during your most intense moments. Absolute Aid, created by nature, made with science, for those who seek to do more. Yeah, that's a great way to be. That's how I am as well. I mean, I do not put a lot of faith in a lot of things. I always am like trying to fact check whatever comes my way, because, I do not like that a lot of things, the way they're going right now. I mean, take for instance, science. Science has been bastardized. It's like they think of it as like a religion or something. It's like, it's literally just people trying to figure stuff out. Like, there's no secret science society that's trying to like go conform to the liberal agenda, or like, so it gets so insane to me when I step back and like take a look at the broader issues of society. It's like, well, no wonder people don't care about this issue, because they're told that science is lying to them. Like, science is like a cult down the road. Like science is just people studying things. There's no cult. It's literally just like, I'm wrong, I'm right, I'm trying to figure this out. So those kind of broader scale things in society are what concern me, because I'm not an activist or anything either. I just like learn about shit, and then I'm like, man, this is screwed up. Let me talk to people who know more about this than me. And then it just keeps compiling. And like you said, with being informed is hard, because then you're like, man, everything is so fucked right now. And you're just looking and you're like, well, what can I as a person do about it? And I think it's so important what you said, and I fall into the same line of belief, is it's all about making the change personally. Like, I do things personally that a lot of other people aren't going to do because they're important to me, like learning about these issues that we're talking about, or learning about hunting rights issues, or learning about water access issues, or learning about whatever, or like trying to stay in shape. Those are all like counterculture things nowadays, which is very insane to me. Like, learning and exercising are like the new death metal. Like, it's underground culture now. Everybody's so complacent with things. I don't know. I went down a rabbit hole there, spouting my...
I mean, in psychology, I think they call this Dunning-Kruger, where you take like the climate argument, for example, where and you've got scientists on one side, like the 99 scientists that say like human beings are influencing the climate, and then you've got one person that's like, there's no way human beings are changing the climate, and then they've got their little argument for why they have that belief or whatever, and it's usually like, we're too small, or there's no way human activity could be influencing this. And on the one side, science by its nature is very skeptical. It doesn't deal in like absolutes. It deals in trends. It deals in theories that you either prove or disprove, and it tends toward a certain direction. And so So when you put the scientist across the table from one of these climate deniers or whatever you want to call them, the climate denier has a high degree of confidence with very little information. And then the scientist has a medium degree of confidence in claims that they're making with tons of information.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got this person who's dealing in absolutes, like absolutely not. There's no way human beings could be influencing the climate of the planet. And then the scientist who can't argue with the same force or the same words because, you know, they're looking at all of these different indicators, all of these different trends. You know, whether that's CO2 that they're collecting from the top of a mountain in Hawaii and storms, you know, the scope and scale of storms that are battering the East Coast and the totality of information, which, you know, it's like the theory of everything. You're never going to have the theory of everything, I don't think, you know, which is some sort of mathematical equation that if you punch it into something, it will like give you the everything that's going to happen ever. You know, that's just an impossibility, but we see trends. And so you argue based off of trends. And so, but it's so much easier to not want to get mired down in the details and the nuance of all these little things. And instead just say like, oh, well, so-and-so said that human beings can't do this. And it's just much more easy for me to understand a system where, you know, we either have low or no impact,
mm-hmm.
you know, versus trying to understand exactly what our impacts are, which is beyond a Herculean task.
Yeah.
But the data points a certain direction. What is it? Absolutely. We're never going to know that. We're going to keep on asking the questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I think it's really hard to have meaningful debates anymore, because someone on one side, or, you know, and this happens in the political arena where both sides are just sort of ill-informed, and then you've got two people arguing about nothing because neither one knows what the hell they're talking about. But in terms of science, you know, science is a process, and when you put a process that is ongoing up against someone who's already made a decision,
mm-hmm.
You know, one of those things is very confident in itself and the other is less confident in itself. But one of them has data behind it and the other has little or no data behind it. So who do you want to be? Do you want to be the simpleton that's just like regurgitating things that you were told to say? Or do you want to learn more?
Mm-hmm.
And if what you're saying is true, that, you know, learning is sort of an underground culture, I mean, we're really in a sad place.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm just making this up as I go, but that's how it feels to me. Like, I'm always the oddball out, like, hey, I'm reading this book about climate change. And people are like, reading? I haven't read since high school. I was like, oh my Lord, we are in trouble. And the thing that really is freaking me out is even on this podcast, where it's an open forum for people to talk about pretty much any environmental issue that exists on this planet, as far as I'm concerned, there are still people tiptoeing around saying the words climate change or, you know, global warming, whatever. And that's scary to me, because these are people who like work in this world. And I'm like, we're not doing anyone any favors, in my opinion, by just shutting up and like hoping we don't like offend people. Like, who gives a shit? Like, whose side are we on here, people? You know,
yeah.
I don't know if you noticed that, but like that specific climate change topic, people just skirt it like there's no tomorrow. It's insane. People don't want to be, you said this, people don't want to be bothered with the information, right? Like most folks are born and they live and die within 50 miles of where they were born. Yep.
And, you know, if that's your the totality of your experience on the planet, your thinking is going to be rather limited.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you go overseas, you go to really any of these other countries where, it's not to say that they've got it all figured out, but where, you know, some basic facts are just kind of more generally accepted.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, that more people need to do that. More,
Yeah.
you know, I was at a conference this one time of producers and factual producers. So, like, you know, people that make stuff for Nat Geo and
Mm-hmm.
history, which not all of it is factual programming anymore, but you know, at the time, and this guy from Austria this was in 2014, and he said something to me that stuck with me, and he said Americans are very similar to the Soviets, and that they're isolated from the rest of the world in terms of information. In Russia, it was an Iron Curtain, and in America, it's your media.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not concerned or really even aware of other things happening around the planet. And we're both societies that are kind of kept in the dark, the way that our media is set up in terms of these global phenomena. It's like maybe the gas price thing would have just been totally laughable to everybody if more people knew what the situation is elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because this isn't unique to us. In fact, our prices are pretty low, generally speaking, on gasoline. So just one example. So that's the thing. It's like it's very comfortable to start somewhere and stay there and end there.
Mm-hmm.
It's less comfortable to go outside of that place. And I'm not talking about getting on a cruise ship where, you know, everything is catered to you in the way you expect it to be. I'm talking about like getting into, you know, a place that's totally unfamiliar and seeing how other people live and actually gaining some perspective on life on the planet. And obviously that's probably somewhat limited to people who have means to do so.
Yes.
But it's also a choice, right? I mean, more people could be, you know, test their fearlessness and explore the world a little bit more, just to try and learn something. Just to, you know, people in college always were like, well, I'm going to go to Europe. I'm going to go do the Europe thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they tend to start there, and the lucky ones, you know, that just whets their appetite, and then they want to go somewhere else, and then they want to go somewhere else, and then they want to go somewhere else, and become a global citizen. That's really what we need more of is people who, even if you don't geographically go there, maybe you have a physical thing that like prevents you from doing these sorts of things, but there's ways to access information about other people. We're more connected now than we've ever been, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're also more tribal than we've ever been.
Yes.
And sticking into our own little groups. And, you know, I guess I challenge people that do that. And we all tend toward that. We all, you know, because it's easy to do. It's comfortable, right? But
yeah.
Our natural pull is to be pulled into these little groups where people agree with us and acknowledge us and affirm what we're saying or whatever. Just be fucking skeptical of that and go put yourself in a place where you're the minority, where you're the person with the background or lifestyle that's different from everybody else, and see how that feels. And, you know, I'm doing that in November. I'm going to Nepal for a month. And I've been there before, but
cool.
You know, I mean, why am I doing that? I just worked 3 years on this project and I need a mental reset, but
yeah,
it's just gain some perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like Doesn't that sound exciting? Doesn't that thing to just for a second, just doubt what you're hearing, and see if something else fits.
Yep. Well, and I would agree, man. Even if you can't travel outside the U.S., I mean, the best thing that ever happened to me was when I was, 17, 18 years old. I went on tour with like a metal band, and man, I saw the whole country, the desert, Texas, from Washington, Idaho, all these places that were just like in textbooks that I'd never thought I'd go, because I was that kid that grew up in Ohio I grew up in Southeast Michigan. I was born in Ohio. I moved to Southeast Michigan when I was a kid, but like, I was just like in this is my life. Like, I'd go to the same 10 places over and over and over again. And every 5 years we'll go to Florida or something. So I saw the country, and I was the minority, man. Like, you go play a show at a bar outside a Native American reservation. You're the only white person. Like, that really changes your perspective on things, and you learn a lot. And that's why I am like I am today, I think, as well, which you pointed out. Like, I'm like, that doesn't sound right. Like, people are like, oh, like everybody that we always talk to on the road, like, oh, don't go here. There's all these Mexican guys, they'll steal all your gear and stuff, like all this fears. And then you go there and you're like, everybody was super cool, man. I don't know what you're talking about. So like, that's where I learned to question everything. Like, it's all bullshit to me. Like, if somebody says something to me, I'm like, I don't think that's true, but okay. And then everybody around me is like, oh, I can't believe you'd go there. Like, why? What do you know about it other than what you've heard on television, which is 100% bullshit. So, yeah.
I think travel like that, among other things, it just sort of, it puts you on your best behavior. Because now you have to represent something.
Yeah.
Now you're a representative of what people expect of you. And the prejudices or stereotypes or whatever they think you're going to fit into. Now you have to now you're the one that has to be the representative for, quote unquote, other people that look like you. Right. And that puts you that can put you on your best behavior and make you a global citizen.
Yep. I think that's really important. And, before we wrap up here, I want to give you an opportunity to let people, where they can learn more, where they can see the film. And if you have any other cool projects you're working on that you're excited about, feel free to shout them out as well.
Where, I'm not going to decide on the next project until I get back from this little retreat, we'll call it. But folks can watch The Erie Situation September 12th at 9 p.m. on PBS in Cleveland, in Buffalo, in Erie, in Detroit, in Marquette, in Toledo. I may have mentioned one of those twice, but it'll be on 6 PBS stations, 9 p.m., September 12th. There'll be a watch party at 7 p.m. on Facebook Live through those PBS affiliates and on YouTube. And then they could also request screenings for their group too. I'm doing that for like the Sierra Club in Cleveland sometime in September. So you can learn more about all of these events and screenings at theeriesituation.com. Click on events, and it'll have a listing of everything that's happened and everything that's in the works. Eventually, I expect this to be on demand somewhere. And keep the conversation moving.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I want to thank you for coming out. I learned a ton from you. I think this has been one of the more eye-opening conversations I've had in a while about, especially on the farming side. You're really informed on that. So thank you for the work you're doing. And, I would encourage anyone to go see the film, especially people that live in this area, Toledo specifically. I mean, if you're listening to this, check it out. You can get it for free, like you said, on PBS coming up here soon. And, learn some more stuff, man. I think if there's anything anyone can take away from this podcast, it's like, just learn stuff. Go do things and learn stuff.
Be skeptical.
Yep.
Skeptical.
Yep. All right. So thanks, David. I'll let you get back to your marathon half marathon training, and keep up the good work.
Yeah. Hey, well, I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yep.